Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. We begin by praising Allah, we praise Him, we seek His help, and we ask for His forgiveness. And we take refuge with Allah from the evil of ourselves and from the evil consequence of our evil actions. Whomsoever Allah guides, no one can misguide, and whomsoever Allah leaves to go astray, no one can guide. And I testify that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone is worthy of worship, and that Muhammad is His servant and messenger. My dear brothers and sisters, we've been talking about a very, very important topic, and that is the importance of keeping the ties of relationship and how it is a major sin to sever and to break the ties of relationship. And before that, we talked about obedience to parents. And all of this is in the context of a wider topic. The wider topic is the family. The family, brothers and sisters, is the bedrock of any human society. If the family is strong, if the family structures are strong, if there is unity and harmony within the family, there will be unity and harmony within society. And this is something that I would say is a fact. It is a fact of human life. There may be exceptions here and there may be exceptions there, but by and large, throughout human history, and our experience also shows this reality, that the family is the bedrock of society, and a stable, happy, harmonious family is the reason, the main reason for a stable, happy, harmonious society. And it's only logical that that is the case. Because if the family is stable, if the family is harmonious, if the children are obedient to the parents, then you will find also that they will be obedient in respect to the laws of the society and in respect to the ruler of the society, and so on and so forth. And again, we don't mean any of this to take away from the fact that we should stand against injustice and tyranny and oppression, surrender to injustice and tyranny or oppression. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not love either that we should oppress or that we should allow ourselves to be oppressed. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, help your brother whether he is the oppressor or the oppressed. So the companion said, O Messenger of Allah, we know how to help our brother if he's the oppressed. We can defend him, we can help him, we can protect him against oppression. But if he's the oppressor, how do we help our brother if he's an oppressor? The Prophet ﷺ said, stop him from his oppression. Inshallah, again, we will talk about that very important topic later. But I'm mentioning it within the context of this very important structure and harmony within society. We need that structure, we need that harmony, we need law and order and peace and prosperity. But the root of that is not as some people imagine, as some political and social thinkers have imagined, and they have this structuralist viewpoint of society. Thinkers seem to be obsessed with controlling every aspect of the human being's life through rules and regulations and through bureaucracy, and watching everybody with cameras like George Orwell's 1984, as if they want to themselves emulate the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because in reality that's the only way they can do it, to make people think that they are being watched and that they're going to get caught. In the Muslim tradition, in our religion, everyone primarily needs to be first and foremost looking after themselves. We have to be our own policemen. We have to govern our own behavior. And we do that because we are afraid of Allah. We are afraid of our Creator. That's the basis of our law. That's the basis of our morality. We know our religion is from Allah. We know that Allah, the Creator, is watching us and seeing us and has power over us. And He is most capable of punishing us and rewarding us in this life as well as the life to come. So that's the basis of how we behave. So very much in Islam, we have this self-regulatory approach. The whole basis of society is built upon this idea of taqwa, of fearing Allah, of being conscious of Allah. And the family has this very, very important role to play in that regard. Now, I'm going to be talking now about what is a very controversial subject for many people, and that is about the position of women in Islam, and also specifically the attitude and the behavior of the wife towards the husband. Now, before I get into this topic and I start beginning to quote some hadith, and I have even seen people raise very controversial objections to these sayings of the Prophet, and even Muslims, people who claim to be Muslims, having problems with Islam based upon these things that the Prophet ﷺ has said concerning how the wife should be obedient to the husband. But that's why I introduced this whole topic about society, about how society works, about what holds society together, about the mechanisms that allow society to be successful. I ask you to think deeply, especially those people who seem to be confused about these subjects. What happens when children disobey parents? What happens when authority is not respected anymore? What happens when there is no system of authority? What happens when people don't respect law and authority? Have you been the victim of crime? Have you been the victim of corruption on the wider society? Then you will know how important respect of law and respect for authority is. So let's apply this understanding to a smaller scale. We're used to thinking of, because that's the way the dominant social political system is at the moment. The dominant political and social system is the Western system. And they put so much authority in the hands of the governments. But in Islam, the authority primarily is going to start with the individual over their own selves. And then with the man being in authority over his family, and the mother or the wife being in authority over the house and the children. Everyone, the Prophet ﷺ said, is a shepherd. And everyone will be asked about their flock. So the ruler will be asked about his people. And the husband will be asked about his wife. And the wife will be asked about the children and the household. This is our religion. Everyone has specific roles. Everyone has duties which they need to perform. And if everyone performs those roles and those duties according to Allah's guidance, without oppression, without injustice, but performing those duties willingly and happily, being conscious of Allah and fearing Allah, then you will have a successful and harmonious and happy society. But when those roles break down, when people do not fulfill those obligations, when the parents are not respected, when the children disobey the parents, when the wife disobeys the husband, when the husband oppresses the wife, when the men do not listen to the ruler and so on, their emir and so on and so forth, what happens is society begins to disintegrate. Then you have chaos, you have lawlessness, you have destruction, you have suffering, and so on and so forth. So all of this leads to the corruption of mankind and disunity and disharmony in society. This is how Islam brings peace. This beautiful system of life, this beautiful way of life that is revealed by Allah. So I'm going to talk about a question. Who is more superior, men or women? That's controversial, isn't it? Let's start by that. Who is more superior, men or women? Well, the Quran says that Allah has given men a superiority over women. There you go. It's in the Quran. We can't say anything except the truth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah has given men a superiority over women. But the verses of the Quran go on to say, because he spends out of his wealth for her. So this is part of the reason. The man spends from his wealth to maintain and to protect the woman. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us that men are the maintainers and the protectors of women. In our way of living, the way of living that we are sure has been prescribed from Allah, the all-knowing Creator, for the benefit of humanity. Allah has made men, the duty of men, to maintain and protect. The man's job is to earn the money. The man's job is to provide for his family, to look after his wife, to protect her, to make sure that she has a house, she has clothing, she has food for her and her children. His job, his duty is to go out and earn the money. Her primary task is to care for the household and educate and nurture and look after the children. Now, although Allah has given man a superiority, this superiority only means in terms of authority and obedience. Because man has that task of having to maintain and protect, because his fundamental duty within the structure of society is to make sure that his wife and his children are doing the right things, they are people of virtue, they are following the path of virtue, they are saying their prayers, they are giving the zakah, they are giving charity, performing Ramadan, they have good character, they do what is right, they join the ties of relationship, and so on and so forth. That is the man's primary job, to ensure that these things are being done and that evil is being kept away from. So that is the man's superiority only in terms of authority. And so the wife needs to respect that authority that Allah has given to the man, to her husband, just as the man needs to respect the authority of the emir, of the ruler. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, he said, hear and obey your emir, even if he is an Abyssinian slave. Meaning, at the time of the Prophet, the Abyssinians, who were like, they were Africans, and in the Arabs, quite often they found that the Abyssinians, they took them and captured them as slaves. And so they were considered to be the lowest people in society. Yet, the Prophet ﷺ said, if your emir, your ruler, is even someone who in your mind, and Islam, by the way, has no racism. It is not that in any way, shape or form, Islam is racist. No, it's the opposite. Indeed, the Prophet ﷺ said there is no difference between the white man and the black man, between the Arab and the non-Arab. The only difference is piety. How pious are you? How much do you fear God? There is no difference otherwise. But the Prophet ﷺ is using an example. I suppose in India, for example, you might say, that even if someone who is from the outcast, from the untouchables, even untouchable was your emir, your ruler, obey him. It's the equivalent of the Prophet ﷺ. That's what he's saying. Obey your ruler, even if he is an Abyssinian slave. That is how important it is to obey the ruler. The Prophet ﷺ said to the men, this is primarily to the men, because the obedience of the ruler, it is the men, generally in Muslim society, who have to obey the command and who are interacting with the ruler and the command of the ruler. So the Prophet ﷺ said, even if he beats your back and takes your property, obey your ruler. This is how much the ruler should be obeyed. However, the ruler is never obeyed if he is ordering you to disobey God, to disobey Allah. If anyone orders you to disobey Allah, there is no obedience to the creation in disobedience to Allah. So the man obey the emir. Who is the emir in the family? The man is the emir over his wife and children. So similarly, it is part of the structure and the ordering of society that Allah has given man that responsibility. And oh brothers, please remember that your position is a position of responsibility. The more responsibility you have, the more accountable you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you have taken or been given a position of responsibility, Allah is going to ask you about those under your command and under your authority. And that means you will be accountable. And the more responsibility you have, the more accountability that you have. That is why the Prophet ﷺ said to the men, fear Allah concerning the women. Be mindful of Allah, fear Allah concerning the women. the best of you are those who treat their wives the best. The best of you are those who treat their wives the best. Now, I want to discuss what is a very controversial topic, and that is some verses in the Quran that talk about how the man has been told in the Quran that if he finds some disobedience and some rebelliousness from his wife, that means, let's understand what that means. The man as Amir, the man as ruler, as leader over his family, he has the duty and the responsibility to make sure that his wife and his children are keeping away from evil and are behaving in the best and the most appropriate manner. That means that Allah has given him authority. And if someone has authority, they must also be given the means to implement and to apply that authority and to correct someone who transgresses that authority. Now that authority is in respect to obeying Allah. By the way, this is something that I don't know any society. I am not aware of any society in the world today that does not have a system of authority, and within it there are people, we call them police, that's what we normally call them in English. As far as I know, nearly every society has some type of police force. And the rulers give the police force authority to stop people committing crimes. And sometimes they are given the authority to apply deadly force. They can shoot and kill people who are committing crimes. Many police forces in the world, including in the United States of America, including in many European countries, France and Germany and Italy and Spain and Portugal, the police are routinely armed. They carry guns, they carry weapons, and they are allowed to use them and even kill another human being under certain circumstances and situations. They also carry truncheons, sticks with which they can beat people, or nightsticks, or spray, which they can spray in people's eyes. They can arrest them and confine them. So this is the authority the state gives to the police in order to keep law and order. So we accept universally amongst human beings that some people have been given authority, and that authority allows them to implement a degree of force and a degree of restraint in order to make sure that the society is running smoothly. Now, I would like us to think conceptually, as a concept. Isn't it, I find it really extraordinary that in a society, we, like, for example, and I'm from the United Kingdom, in the UK, we give perfect strangers authority to commit acts of violence against perfect strangers. Policemen and policewomen have been given the authority to commit acts of violence against people they do not know at all. They see them committing a crime or what they might think is a crime. They have the authority to beat them, to restrain them, to spray mace or to spray the spray in their face which causes severe pain, and even under some circumstances, the police have the authority to shoot and to kill another human being, even though that person is a complete stranger. Yet, we at the same time, in some so-called civilized societies, are passing laws that prevent someone who knows that person, a father, is prevented and a mother is prevented from applying some type of physical restraint and some type of physical application to, for example, discipline their children. So the police have authority to apply force on a perfect stranger, but a father does not have authority to apply force to prevent his own child from committing a crime, even though almost certainly in 99.99% cases that father loves that child. Is not a stranger, he loves that child, and he wants to stop that child from doing evil. Similarly, the mother wants to stop that child from doing evil. In the Quran, Allah has given the man who is the head of the household some authority, some limited type of authority, in order to discipline his family, including his wife, in order to prevent them from falling into evil. Now that is very limited, and Allah has explained very clearly what that process is. Number one, he should admonish his wife. He should admonish his wife. If he finds that his wife is committing some act, serious act of disobedience to Allah, not she's not making him a cup of tea when he feels like it. No, this is not what it is talking about. This is talking about some serious issue. First, he should advise her. He should admonish her. He should tell her to fear Allah, to be mindful of Allah. Look what Allah says in the Quran. Look what the Prophet ﷺ told us about this and about that. If she does not respond to that, then he separates from her in the bed, meaning he does not have intimate relations with her, or it's a type of him showing that he is displeased with her, and he makes a type of separation from her. Then the Quran says that if she still doesn't respond, and how long could this go on for? Abdullah ibn Abbas, for example, mentioned that this may go on for up to a year. But if still she is not responding to this, then the Quran allows him to apply some very, very limited form of physical restraint or force. And I mean, the word is translated as beat, but that is not the correct meaning. Because the Prophet ﷺ clearly said that he is not allowed to hit the face or make any mark that leaves a bruise. So there is no excuse ever for domestic violence, for a man to beat his wife, to hit her, to punch her, to kick her, or anything like that, is absolutely and totally prohibited in Islam. And indeed, if a man does that, he can be taken by the court and he can be punished, and his wife can do the same thing back to him. In fact, this even happened in one instant in a case in Saudi Arabia where a woman was hit by her husband in a manner that bruised her, and she was allowed to retaliate, although she didn't, and she forgave him, but the court gave her and that was allowed to happen. Okay, so the point being is that it's a limited type, but the Prophet ﷺ made it very clear, the best of you are not those who beat their wives, and the Prophet himself never physically harmed his wife. So, brothers and sisters, this is a type of authority Allah has given the man over the woman in the context of the family and social situation that we have been talking about in Islam, and we will talk about it more, insha'Allah, in our next session. So please make sure you listen to the next one. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide all of us on the right path. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.